Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman in for Richard French. Polls are open in 5 states right now. On the Republican side, Ohio and Florida are the big prizes. They are winner take all, and Marco Rubio and John Kasich are trying to win their home states and knock down Donald Trump. On the Democratic side, Hillary is trying to bounce back from her upset loss to Bernie in Michigan. Let's go now to Miami for the very latest, and for that, we turn to Marcy Gonzalez. Good evening, Marcy.
Hi, Florida playing such a crucial role with the first polls set to close in about an hour on this primary day that could change the shape of the presidential race.
Let's get everybody out to vote.
Today, voters casting ballots.
We need a change.
In 5 states.
How are you feeling about tonight?
I'll tell you in a few hours.
Pivotal primaries, especially in the 2 GOP winner-take-all contests. Victories in Ohio and Florida for frontrunner Donald Trump could whittle this down to a 2-man race with Ted Cruz and potentially clear Trump's path to the nomination.
If Donald Trump sweeps, there's not going to be a contested convention.
Trump facing his toughest battle in Ohio.
This is a place I want to win. This is the place. This is going to do it.
Going into today tied in the polls with Governor John Kasich.
We're going to win. I feel terrific.
Also counting on home state advantage, Marco Rubio in Florida.
It always comes down to Florida, doesn't it?
Polling behind Trump and fighting to claim the biggest prize of the day.
If you're Marco Rubio, if you don't win your home state of Florida, you are in a disastrous position.
On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton starting the day ahead in the polls, but carefully watching Ohio, where Bernie Sanders threatens another upset. And Sanders will be in Arizona tonight, already looking ahead to next week's primary there, while Clinton, Trump, and Rubio will all be here in South Florida awaiting tonight's results. Live in Miami, Marcy Gonzalez, ABC News. Now back to you.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Let's get right to the analysis, and for that, we bring in tonight's panel. Kostas Panagopoulos is professor of political science and the director of the Center for Electoral Politics and Democracy at Fordham University. I got your name right, but your title wrong. Jessica Proud is a Republican strategist and PR expert with the November team. Scott Vanderhoff is a former 5-term Rockland County executive, and Dominic Carter is here, political journalist and author. Let's start on the Republican side. I want to go around the table. Give me a summary of what happens tonight. How many states does Donald Trump win? If he loses any, where does he lose? Jessica.
Well, everyone's looking at Ohio and Florida as the real contest. I think Kasich probably will pull it out in Ohio, which does make it a little bit more difficult for Donald Trump to get to that magic 1237 number. If Rubio loses Florida tonight, it's going to be very difficult for him to go on. I think you'll probably see him have to get out of the race. But I would not say that Trump is going to be the eventual nominee. I think this is going to continue to be drawn out.
Okay, you're like 4 answers down my question list already after that one. Scott, how many states does Trump win tonight?
I think he wins most of them. I think, but I think Ohio, he may lose it.
Ohio?
Ohio.
Okay, Kostas?
Well, I think, the chances of winning most contests tonight are pretty good for Trump. I think Ohio is probably the place where he's weakest, and I think that really what that might suggest is it may if Rubio sort of drops out of the picture after tonight, if he doesn't do well in Florida, we may be seeing a 3-man race rather than a 2-man race.
Dominic.
Kasich definitely wins Ohio. Trump sweeps everything else.
I'll stay with you, Dominic. Is tonight the final night of the Marco Rubio campaign?
Not necessarily. If Kasich wins Ohio, there's no path for Rubio. That's who you asked about, right? Mm-hmm. No path for Rubio to be the nominee. Absolutely not.
So what does he stay in for?
Well, would you drop out? If you don't have a seat to go back to, you have nothing waiting for you except for a governor's race potentially down the road. And it may, if Kasich wins Ohio, it's going to go to a brokered convention. You're a top Latino. You can maneuver your way onto the ticket, possibly at a minimum.
Kostas, you agree? Is this it for Rubio?
Well, I think it would be a tough sell for voters, but I agree. There's a chance. Why not stay in? What's he got to lose at this point? But I don't see that anyone really has a clear path, because if you look at the Republican rules for the convention right now, you need to get a majority of delegates in at least 8 states. Trump just did that, and already with all these victories, he's still only the first candidate to technically become eligible to be nominated. Even Cruz got at least halfway to go. He's got 4 more contests to win to get a majority of delegates in those states to even be eligible. There are just not that many states left. So I don't even know if anyone will be eligible for a nomination unless they change the rules.
The trouble with that is they change the rules.
Right. Yeah, they could change
those
they can do that on the first day of the primary.
2012 rules,
Yes.
and they can change it so that you don't have to do it. I think Jessica hit on I mean, if Kasich loses tonight in Ohio, I think Trump becomes the nominee. I don't see how. I don't think Cruz can catch him.
You know, on the off chance that Rubio scores an upset and somehow wins Florida and Kasich wins Ohio, you know, that will keep all 4 of them in the race for much longer. Earlier on in this race, we had been talking about, well, if Trump can just get one-on-one with somebody, Trump goes down because there's more not Trump voting out there on the Republican side than there are Trump supporters. Is that still true right now, Jessica? Because if it's just Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, I'm not sure that Ted Cruz is popular enough that he could catch it.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at all the polling, when it's head-to-head, and even Rubio could have made this argument for a while. I don't know if he could still make it after tonight. But when you look at the head-to-head, Trump one-on-one versus these other candidates, he's losing the race. So the problem is there's no way for Kasich to catch up. There's no way for Rubio to catch up. But if it goes to July, to the convention, there's going to be a lot of horse trading. Those delegates are only bound by the first ballot. So you could very well see a contested convention.
I want to jump over to the Democratic side because a week ago we got a big surprise when Bernie Sanders won Michigan. And the polls are sort of all over the place in Illinois and Ohio, and there's been very little polling in Missouri. Do we think that there's a Bernie upset in there somewhere? And if he does well, particularly in the Midwest states, does that change the balance of the Democratic race? Scott?
I don't think there's an upset. I mean, of course, I said that before Michigan, so I don't think he carries it. And I think he's had his run. I think he's probably over after tonight. I think, you know, even if he wins one of the smaller states, I think Hillary's going to take enough, and she's way ahead. I mean, today he admitted that he really only ran as a Democrat because, you know, they could sponsor him. He didn't have $1 billion. So I don't know how he wins.
Costas?
I think Sanders' best chances tonight are in Missouri, you know, which is a relatively small state. And even if he does well enough in these other states to, you know, come out of them with some delegates, she's going to get the majority of the delegates tonight. She's already got a huge lead in the delegate count so far, and I think it becomes a tough sell for Bernie Sanders after tonight if she's done as well as expected.
I don't think anyone's really questioning whether or not Hillary's going to wind up as the nominee, but he has shown to be an incredibly strong challenger to her throughout this entire process. And you have to remember, he's also fueled by small dollar donations. So he doesn't need these big establishment types, these big money donors to come in to keep him alive. So he can drag this thing out for as long as he wants. And as long as he does that and stays in the race, he's pulling her to the left.
Well, that's true. But at some point, you start to be a thorn in the side of the Democratic establishment.
Right, but he
at
doesn't
some
care
point.
about that. This
well,
whole
maybe
race
not.
Has been
maybe
a thorn in the side.
maybe his supporters don't care about that either.
The DNC has tried to get him out of the race since day one. They've done everything they possibly could to keep the debates on Saturday nights.
But Hillary needs his supporters in the general election. You can't alienate them.
She's not going to get a lot of them.
I want to pivot towards November. Let's assume that we're looking at Trump versus Hillary when we get to the fall. What happens to what I'm calling second choice voters? You have a lot of Bernie fans and Bernie voters who are saying, well, they might vote Trump instead of voting Hillary because of the difference between the two of them. But then you also have this big group of anybody but Trump. Would they actually cross party lines and vote for Hillary if it comes to November? What happens to the people who don't get their first choice across here, Scott?
They stay home.
Really? They're just going to stay home in mass?
Young people will not vote for Trump. Young people, there's not enough, and I think the people who are behind Sanders are not going to vote, and they're not going to vote for Hillary. And we're all assuming that Hillary's still in the race and doesn't have a legal problem somewhere down the road here, okay? But I don't see them voting for Trump. And then if you get into a Cruz, which is unlikely, versus Hillary, or rather Sanders, there's a whole new question about what the religious folks will do.
Jessica, what about this not Trump group? First of all, you've had all the presidential candidates on stage with Trump saying, yeah, I'll still support the nominee even though we hate him. Do the non-Trump voters out there hold their nose and vote Trump come November?
You know, that's the big wild card. I think that there certainly is a very large contingent of the party right now that is questioning whether or not they can do that. To your point, Republicans hate Hillary and Bernie people don't have a lot of love for her either. So you have an anti-Hillary, but that's why I thought Bloomberg could be an interesting addition to the race, because you're going to have so many people that don't want to go with either of the nominees. If he could change tacks and totally come to the center and tone down the rhetoric and start acting presidential, I'm not predicting it will happen, but he's not stupid. I mean, we can all say what we want about him. He's not a dumb guy.
I don't know if you can put that genie back in the bottle.
Andrew,
well, that's the question.
Here's what's going to happen. I agree with the county exec. Young people are going to stay home, but Bernie supporters are going to hold their nose and vote for Hillary Clinton, because they're going to look at the option of Hillary or Donald Trump, and they're going to conclude, and we've been down this road before, the contested primary, 2008, Obama, Hillary Clinton, the same type of situation.
What about
before she bowed out?
Okay, what about the not Trump Republicans? Do they go for Hillary, or do they just stay home?
Well, there's something else we're leaving out of the equation, and you got to put this in. Trump is energizing Americans in ways that hasn't been done in a very long time. So what about that block of voters, okay, that he's bringing in to the system? This is why I'm telling you, he's been acting like a total clown, that is Donald Trump, as of late. But I am telling you, conventional wisdom is out the window. The experts don't know what they're talking about. He gets the nomination, he could win the White House.
Ixnay on the experts don't know what they're talking. We have
They
four
don't.
experts at the table.
Well, I'm talking about
Present
the other
company
right,
excluded.
present company excluded.
Costas, I'll give you the final word on that.
Yeah, well, you know, I think if you look at the exit polls in most states that have had primaries and caucuses, most Bernie supporters say that they would be okay with a Clinton candidacy. So while I agree that some of them will stay home, many of them will vote for Hillary Clinton. So at least on that side, I think we can expect a lot of them to cross over and support Clinton. And don't forget, they have longer in this cycle to heal the internal party wounds, because the conventions are happening earlier than they typically happen. So there's a longer process that can unfold.
All right, Donald Trump likes to play cop, the Donald Trump, Jessica, who we've all seen and heard on the campaign trail. He also likes to get his protesters kicked out of his rallies. The question is, should he be allowed to do that, and should protesters be at these rallies at all?